This is Dale Maharidge. In today's show, I'm going to tell you about the obsession that Michael Williamson and I had and still have regarding the manufacture of steel. You can see part of that obsession here. I had just taken a picture by laying on the ground of this mill in the Ohio River Valley. This is Michael Williamson. He's not with me physically today, but as usual, he's here with me in spirit. A word on Michael's photographs. All the black and white photos, with the exception of these several of Michael taken by me, were taken by Michael in 1983. The color ones are mine. Many of the photographs in this show and many others were taken from his contact sheets. We couldn't find his negatives, and there were no prints in existence of many of these outtake photographs. So the quality is not as high as they normally would be, but I photoshopped them and did the best I could with them. We'd been in Youngstown, Ohio for a couple of weeks, and we realized we needed to see, feel, and experience and photograph a live steel mill. There's a town of Mingo, Junction, Ohio. Across the river is Weirton, West Virginia, and there are two mills here. So we came down to spend a couple of days to see if we could get some pictures of live mills. Where we had come, you probably know this if you've seen the movie The Deer Hunter. Most of the film was shot in Mingo Junction, Ohio. Even though the film says it takes place in Clairton, Pennsylvania, I don't think any of it was filmed there. It was filmed here, in Cleveland, and a few other places. The steel mills do not like photography. Of course, this is a throwdown for Michael. He always takes pictures like this. He takes delight in it. By the way, the hill in the background is where the truck in the opening scene of The Deer Hunter comes barreling down the hill with sparks flying out of its pipe. So we weren't getting pictures inside the mills, but we figured we're going to pick some pictures of workers coming out of the gate. This is shift change. A lot of guys are streaming out. One woman, as you can see. More and more women were starting to enter the mills in the period when they started closing down. I stood there that day and really didn't interview anybody because I was overwhelmed by what I was hearing in Youngstown, and the stories I would get there were not really part of the book per se. But I did a lot of thinking when I was standing there about the kind of people you're looking at in these pictures. They're my people. I grew up as a blue-collar worker in Cleveland. This is the kind of guys and women that I worked with. You look at their faces, and they're sending their kids to college. They're making good money. They're doing very basic, good, honest work. This is how I grew up. So I was relating to these people. Now, all these years later, I think back to, I did a book in 2005, it came out. I lived in an Iowa town for 1 year. I went to a high-tech firm that was located there in the middle of Iowa in corn country. They had 60 employees. I was kind of impressed by that. And the owner told me, he said, we wouldn't exist if it weren't for corn. The reason we're here is they serviced rural electric companies, did their billing and so forth. They slaughtered 9,400 hogs per day in that little Iowa town I lived in and sold the pork. And as one man told me, all wealth comes from the soil or sea. Either you grow it or you mine it. What I saw there in Iowa was a microcosm of America. All wealth comes from the soil or sea. It's really the world. High-tech jobs are always a pinnacle. There's only so many people who can work high-tech. Most people have to do other things. We're not all going to be high-tech workers. I think we know that by now. So what a steel worker does is not much different than a farmer. You take three kinds of dirt. You take ore, coke, which is really coal, mined from the ground. It's baked in ovens, and the impurities are driven off, and limestone. You put them in a blast furnace. You put heat on it. The coke burns. It provides the energy. The limestone is a fluxing agent. It takes away the impurities. And what comes out is iron, which we make into steel. And so it's a very basic thing, making steel. And so we crossed the Ohio River and went over to Weirton, West Virginia. The town is trying to save the steel mill. National Steel owned the mill for many years, and they were going to shut it down. And the town knew what happened in Youngstown, and they knew if the mill closed, they were cooked. So they decided to try to buy the mill, and they called it an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP. There were green ribbons painted on buildings. There were ribbons tied around poles. It was a major effort. Let's pull our resources. Let's buy the mill and make it employee-owned. This was 1983, and they of course succeeded. And the last time I was in Weirton, not long ago, they were still operating. We wanted to get a picture of the mill. and they were not letting us in. Michael at several points had tried to sneak pictures through cracks in gates and so forth, and guards stopped us. One day we were driving down the street, and we saw sparks and smoke coming from behind a fence. So I let Michael off, and I drove away. And Michael took this series of pictures of a scarfer. When steel is made, there's impurities on it, and they have to be burned off. And the scarfer's job is to burn off the impurities. It's a nasty, awful job. I never asked Bruce this. I will next time I see him. In his song Youngstown, Bruce writes, "I came home from Nam, worked my way to scarfer, a job that would suit the devil as well." And I wonder if it was the picture of this very scarfer who inspired Bruce to write this line. I'll ask him next time I see him. We went to sort of the union headquarters. It was a company union, kind of a half union. It wasn't the United Steelworkers. But there was this mural on the wall, this woman with one arm on the shoulder of the industrialist, the other arm on the worker. And there was sort of a bond, a contract. That's the world I grew up in, the world that was being destroyed at that point, just starting to be destroyed. And of course, everyone today knows there's no contract. So they were trying to save the mill, and you can see in the bulletin board in here there was also some animosity towards imports. And you can make fun of these people, some of my left-leaning friends and some of my right-leaning friends, make fun of people who were against globalization. But you know, we were promised that it would be great for us all. And I won't say any more than to let you be the judge. If globalization has created more jobs or destroyed more jobs. Like this guy with this truck, his bumper stickers. You know, is he crazy? Or was he just ahead of his time? We ended up driving from the Ohio Valley up to Cleveland, where my parents still lived. We stayed with them one night. We went down to Cleveland. There was the Jones and Laughlin and Republic steel mills. And we tried to find ways to get pictures of steel being made. But with the scarfer pictures, what we were left with. But Michael took this series of pictures of the Jones and Laughlin works with these kids coming up the hill. And here you can see some steel coils made by J&L. This is the old neighborhood where my parents grew up. The south side of Cleveland. I knew it well. And we didn't know it, but there was a really great place where we could have gotten some pictures of a working blast furnace. When I visited my parents that Christmas in 1983, I went to this vantage point and took them. And I'll show you some of those pictures in the next slideshow.